Capex quandary: private investments remain tentative amid growth concerns. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, the center has been using public capital expenditure on infrastructure to pump prime the economic recovery. The mantra has been that infrastructure building will stoke demand for products such as cement and steel, generate jobs in construction, and together trigger a strong multiplier effect on the economy, eventually creating conducive conditions for private investors to plan greenfield and brownfield projects. In the budget 2024-25, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said the government will endeavor to maintain strong fiscal support for infrastructure over the next 5 years, in conjunction with imperatives of the other priorities in fiscal consolidation. She announced 11.11 lakh crore of capex spends this year, amounting to 3.4% of GDP. That goal is unlikely to be attained partly due to spending curbs in the poll affected first quarter. The capex push in 25-26. This, while industry has urged the center to continue the capex push in 25-26 as well, it has failed to respond to the government's constant nudges and persuasions to ramp up their own operations. Data show that two of this year's first three quarters have recorded a notable sequential decline in private investment plans, particularly by domestic industry. In quarter one, private capex plans dropped to multi-year lows, and though the July-September quarter recorded a recovery in investment intentions, that uptick has dissipated in quarter three. Projects Today data suggests that domestic investment value dropped 1.4% from quarter 2, while the new projects value dropped over 22% from a year ago, as per the Center for Monitoring in Indian Economy. There are many factors playing on corporate risk taking active capacity, weak quarter 2 results, global uncertainties, spiking cost, and waning demand in more lucrative urban markets. Going by the current indications, including the early bird quarter 3 results, demand has not really improved, nor is there ostensible pressure on factory capacities to warrant expansions. For a sustainable breakout from this slowdown, private capital should take the driving seat because there are limits to enhancing public capex while maintaining fiscal rectitude and providing for myriad welfare scheme. The government must accept that extortions to the industry are unlikely to spur fresh outlays, and incentives focused on themes such as import substitution are insufficient. Not one new rupee will be deployed if a project is unviable and demand flaky. Policy focus should remain firmly on ensuring the ground is ripe to instigate investments and easing the realization of such plans into billowing chimneys and new jobs. For that, boosting incomes and consumption is critical, as is expanding expenditure, expediting micro and macro level reforms. That an economic policy framework outlining next generation reforms promised in the budget has not been heard since is not very comforting. India needs to pump in more time and resources into rural sports. Kho is not by any stretch of imagination among the world's most popular sport, even in India, where the game is have said to originated several centuries ago. It has not yet caught the imagination. Not many would have noticed India's winning the men and women's title at the inaugural Kho World Cup. Pratik Vaikar's men and Priyanka Engel's women flourished, but their collective achievement should not be the cause to gloss over the fact that Kho is not a global sport yet. Indeed, the conduct of Globe World Cup and India winning both the titles could offer the boost to this particular game with a rural heart. Since India is not really a major power in international sport at large, any world title is welcome addition to the not so overflowing cupboard. There are, of course, a few sports in which India is a superpower, such as cricket and chess. Indian cricket may be going through the lowest phase in recent times, notwithstanding the triumph in T20 World Cup last year. But in the mind game on 64 squares, India's grandmasters have been authoring one success story after the another. Latest being D. Kukesh winning the World Championship and Kunuru Hampu Hampi regaining the World Rapid Championship. India's brilliant minds, however, have not received the acclaim or support they deserve, especially after their historic double gold at the Chess Olympiad back in September. From the government or corporate houses, the government could do a lot to raise the profile of games such as Kho, chess, and Olympic disciplines. The disappointment at the Paris Olympics last year, where India failed to win even a single gold and finished 71th, below Pakistan and Kyrgyzstan, was another stark reminder of the state of Indian sport. India won 6 medals, but its performance was below expectation. India's various sports federation needs to review their own functioning, and they could in fact learn lessons from the Board of Control for Cricket in India. For all the criticism directed against it, is running its sports, improving infrastructure, sharing the growth in revenue with players. India may largely be a single sport country, un- unlike the United States or Australia, but a game such as Kabaddi with its Pro Kabaddi League has shown that there is a scope for Indian sport on television beyond cricket. The government at the center and the states could do better by developing infrastructure and nurturing varied sports such as Kho. It is also time to find out if Khelo India is justifying the huge budgetary spend. UGC drafts regulation has serious constitutional issues. The draft regulation by UGC on the selection and appointment of Chancellor of Universities on selection and appointment of Vice Chancellor of Universities has evoked protest by the non-Bharatiya Janata Party headed state governments. Their main objective against this regulation is that it constitutes the violation of federal principles enshrined in the Constitution of India. The state governments concerned have demanded its withdrawal. The UGC has sought to amend Regulation 2010 that relates to the selection and appointment of Vice Chancellor by widening an area of selection. Under the existing regulations, a Vice Chancellor can be selected only from among academicians who have minimum experience of 10 years as professor. Through this amendment, the UGC declares that professionals with 10 plus years experience in industry, public administration, or public policy shall also be considered. The draft regulation raises serious constitutional issues which needs to be examined by separating the political context of protest and possible political reaction. From UGC or party in power, the UGC Act 1956 was enacted by Parliament to make provision for the coordination and determination of standards in universities. For that purpose, to establish the Universities Grant Commission. The Act therefore mandates the UGC to take all the steps as it thinks fit for the promotion and coordination of university education and for determination and maintenance of standards in teaching, examination, and research in universities. For performing these functions, UGC can allocate funds to the universities essentially for the maintenance and development of the universities, recommend measures necessary for the improvement of university education, advise the union or state governments on the allocation of grants to universities for any general or specific purpose, collect information on all matters relating to university education in India and other countries, and make them available to any university regulation of fees. Section 26 of the UGC Act empowers the UGC to make regulations for implementing the mandate of the Act, but it is made clear in this section that these regulations need to be consistent with the Act and the rules made here thereunder. The most important among these regulations relate to defining the qualifications required of a person to be appointment. Def- the most important among these regulations relate to defining the qualifications required of a person to be appointed to teaching staff in a university, the minimum standards of instruction for the grant of degree by university, and regulating to the maintenance of standards and the coordination of work or facilities in universities. The most important Section 26 of UGC Act empowers UGC to make regulations for implementing the mandate of the Act. But it is clear in this section that these regulations need not These regulations need to be consistent with the Act and the rules made thereunder. The most important among these is regulations related to defining the qualifications of the person to be appointment to the teaching staff in the university, minimum standards of instruction for the grant of any degree by a university, and regulating the maintenance of standards and coordination of work or facilities in universities. It is not the job of the UGC. The crucial point that needs to be considered here, whether the regulation made by UGC in respect of selection, qualification, appointment of choice chancellor is consistent with the UGC Act is consistent with the provisions of the UGC Act. As a matter of fact, the Act does not contain any provisions related to the selection and appointment of Vice Chancellor. The fundamental objective of the Act is to determine standards in universities and promotion and coordination of university education. Fundamental objective of the Act is to determine standards in universities and the promotion and coordination of university education, to lay down standards of teaching, and to prescribe the qualifications of teaching staff whose job is to give instructions in is the main function of the UGC, which it does by making periodic regulations. But the problem arises when this statutory body begins to regulate an area which is not a part of the parent act. Rules and regulations are technically called subordinate legislation. The subordinate legislation can be made only in consonance with the provisions of the Act. If the Act goes outside the scope of the Act, it will be called ultra vires, the Act, and hence invalid. To lay down the standards of teaching and to prescribe qualifications of teaching staff whose job is to give instructions is the main function of UGC, which is does by maintaining periodic regulations. The problem arises when a statutory body begins to regulate an area which is not part of the parent act. A close reading of the Act would show that it was not meant to prescribe the qualifications and mode of selection of Vice Chancellor. All universities, whether under the Union or states, are established under a statute made by the respective legislature. Therefore, it is legislature which prescribes the qualification and mode of selection and conditions of service of Vice Chancellor. It is not job of the UGC. The selection and appointment of the Vice Chancellor cannot be considered to be an exercise connected with maintaining the standards of education or promotion and coordination of university education. The Bombay High Court in Suresh Patil Khede versus the Chancellor Universities of Maharashtra and others corroborates this view in the following words. We are of the view that qualifications and methods of appointment of Pro-Chancellor and Vice-Chancellor of the university cannot be treated as satisfying the direct impact test on the standards of education. Therefore, it is safe to assume that under Section 26 of the UGC Act, the UGC has no mandate to make any regulation in respect of the selection and appointment of Vice Chancellor. An interesting constitutional question which arises in the context of UGC's regulations is whether a regulation can override an act passed by the state legislature. The question came up uh, in context of termination of appointment of some vice chancellors in the past. The Bombay High Court in Suresh Patil Khede case, Supra took the view Regulation 73 of the UGC Regulations to 2010, being a subordinate legislation under an Act of Parliament, cannot override plenary legislation enacted by state legislature. However, the Supreme Court of India in Kalyani Mathivanan versus KV Jayaraj and others overruled it by holding we hold the UGC regulations through a subordinate legislation has binding effect on the universities to which applies. The reason given by the court for reaching this conclusion is that it is only when both the houses of parliament approve the regulation the same can be given effect. It may be clarified here that parliament does not formally approve any rule or regulation laid by the house. It can only amend a rule which has already come into effect before it is so laid. If parliament amends the rule, it will thereafter be effective in the amendment form. With due respect to the Lordships, the observation of the court does not correctly reflect the parliamentary procedure relating to the laying down of rules and regulations in the House of Parliament. The question whether the UGC regulations override a state law can be answered only in terms of Article 254 of the Constitution, which deals with repugnancy. Under this article, if the state law is repugnant to the central law, the state law, to the extent of repugnancy, be void, but it is the regulation made by the UGC central law within the meaning of Article 254. Clause 2 of this article says, if a law made by the legislature of the state has been reserved for the consideration of the President and has received his assent, it shall prevail in the state. But in this clause, the word law simply means the bill passed by the legislation and sent to the President. It does not include the rules and regulations which are framed only by assent is received. So, what overrides a state law is a bill passed by both houses of parliament and assented to by President, and certainly not the subordinate legislation. A key ruling. In any case, the court made a significant ruling on the question of the mandatory application of Regulation 7.3.0 of the UGC relating to the selection and appointment of Vice Chancellor in Kalyani Mathivanan case, Kalyani Mathivanan case. It says, however, the finding of Bombay High Court that Regulation 730 has to be treated as recommendatory in nature. It is upheld insofar it relates to universities and colleges under the state legislation. This ruling may help resolve the present controversy. Prioritizing IMEC is in America's best interest. The United States-India relationship has evolved into an increasingly vital strategic partnership ever since the Clinton administration laid the foundation stone in this direction in 1990s. Today, broad bipartisan consensus supports building upon these ties even further, driven by converging interest in economic growth, regional security, and democratic values. As global dynamics shift, the importance of this relationship for the Trump administration becomes even more pronounced. The India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor agreement presents a tremendous opportunity for President Trump to solidify this multilateral partnership while advancing both strategic interests of US and India. By leading a group to secure cooperation among participating nations, the US can help create a robust economic corridor to ensure free and open trade routes. The US can help create a robust economic corridor to ensure free and open trade routes with enhanced energy security and technological innovation, which in turn will also benefit American companies. Announced in 2023, IMEC represents an ambitious vision to forge an integrated network spanning three vital regions through advanced physical and digital infrastructure. The corridor must develop efficient transportation routes, including railways, shipping networks, maritime connections, while also establishing cross-border electricity and hydrogen pipelines and digital communication cables. The end goal should be to enhance trade connectivity and reduce transportation costs while diversifying global supply chains and promoting deeper economic integration among participating countries. At the moment, it is reasonable to suggest that IMEC is more conceptual in it than concrete. Meeting its lofty goals requires extensive planning and cooperation. The Trump administration's leadership on this matter could enhance its legacy on the international stage. By supporting IMEC, the US and India can establish compelling alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative, creating a more balanced global economic architecture that aligns with Western democratic values. IMEC was never destined to be a straightforward endeavor. Each participating nation faces a complex calculus of investment, political will, and economic strategy. The corridor demands substantial infrastructure investment that directly compete with the other national priorities. Moreover, private sector engagement introduces another layer of complexity. Corporate investors require clear pathways to return on investment, and without active engagement from the private sector, it is unlikely that projects could succeed. Several countries, such as Greece and Italy, have shown substantial initiative on IMEC. France has distinguished itself by appointing special envoy in the Gerald Mestralet, who is not a traditional diplomat. France President Emmanuel Macron has chosen a proven business has chosen a proven business leader from France to head this geopolitical and economic initiative as he recognizes its economic potentials for France. The UAE and Saudi Arabia appreciate the role IMEC can play in advancing relations with the West and have spearheaded efforts for its implementation. Without regular strategic engagement, there is a significant risk of creating an uneven economic landscape that could breed tension and political friction among participating nations. The corridor offers transformative economic opportunities not just for coastal regions and primary ports, but also for inland areas that could become crucial nodes in the expansive trade. Even within the region, we have already seen countries such as Iraq and Turkey initiate trade agreements to complement IMEC. IMEC promises substantial economic advantages for India by dramatically reducing trade costs and transforming maritime logistics. This strategic network reduces vulnerability to potential disruptions such as those that might occur in the Suez Canal, but also creates compelling opportunities for increased foreign direct investment. By positioning itself as an alternative to the BRI, the corridor allows India to strengthen diplomatic ties with West Asian and European countries. There are implications to this deal that could impact the Earth's climate health. India has emerged as a significant player in green hydrogen development, positioning itself as a global leader in this emerging clean energy technology. The country has launched ambitious initiatives to develop green hydrogen as a strategic component of its energy transition and decarbonization effect. India is collaborating with international partners such as Germany and Japan and developing infrastructure for green hydrogen production, storage, and transportation. This will help reduce carbon emissions, decrease dependence on fossil fuel imports, and create new job opportunities in emerging technology sectors. The Trump administration's role in facilitating the Abraham Accords proved instrumental in creating the diplomatic conditions that made IMEC possible. Former US President Joe Biden has a strong proponent of IMEC. Looking ahead, questions remain about IMEC's future under potential US leadership. One intriguing factor is that Mr. Trump's warm personal relationship with India's Prime Minister. This rapport could prove significant to the ongoing relations. Now that there is peace agreement between Israel and Hamas, both leaders could facilitate the much needed meeting of IMEC participants to discuss the few steps. This endeavor transcends traditional infrastructure development. It represents a fundamental reimagining of the regional economic cooperation that requires unprecedented levels of coordination among diverse stakeholders. The US and India are key architects of the corridor. It must work closely to shepherd this project to completion, recognizing both its economic significance and environmental implications for all participating countries. We need distinguished jurists as judges. A critical aspect of judicial system is effective and timely delivery of justice. This can be achieved in Indian judicial system only if the significant crisis of backlogs and vacancies is addressed urgently by both judiciary and the government. Data as of January 1 25 show that 371 posts of the 1122 post sanctions across high courts of the country remain vacant. The Allahabad High Court functions at only 50% of its total sanction strength. Naturally, this has direct impact on already alarming levels of backlog. As millions of people have to wait for a long time for justice, their faith in the judicial system is eroding. 371 posts of 1100 posts across high courts remain vacant. Although this has been a perennial issue, there are now more than 60 lakh cases pending across all high courts, an astonishing number. To solve this, we need both immediate remedial steps and reformative steps. While it is While it is true that pace of collegium recommendations and resulting appointments has picked up in the last couple of years, it has unfortunately not been able to match the number of retirements and ever increasing number of filings. In turn, this has put enormous strain on the system, compelling judges to take on a higher caseload than feasible. This is likely to adverse impact. It is likely to adversely impact both the time given as well as the depth of engagement with a particular case. Therefore, a well-staffed judiciary functioning at near total sanctioned strength is the need of the hour. In the context, Article 124, Clause 3C and Article 217 2C, now repealed of the Constitution, became increasingly significant. These provisions allow for the These provisions allow for the appointment of individuals who, in the opinion of the President, are distinguished jurists as the judges of the Supreme Court and the High Courts. In context of Article 124, 3, Clause 3, Subclause C, Article 21C, 217, Clause 2, Subclause C, now repealed. These provisions allow the appointment of individuals who, in the opinion of President, are distinguished jurists as judges of the High Court and Supreme Court. Unfortunately, Article 124 3C remains unutilized and 217 2C has been repealed without any stated reason. In other words, no jurist has been found to be distinguished enough to be appointed to these posts till date, although it is a routine practice in jurisdictions across globe to appoint jurists as judges. Global appointments to the High Court and Supreme Court in India have been either from the bar or from judicial services at the time when the issue of vacancies and backlogs is stifling the system. Introducing and invoking the provision to appoint distinguished jurists to high courts of the country can turn out to be a game changer. In fact, a similar idea was floated by Sri Shibban Lal Saxena, but negatived by Constituent Assembly on June 7, 1949 without any meaningful deliberation. Involved the meaning Involving the world of academia directly into the mainstream judicial Indian judicial system can bring both immense benefits and challenges. A vast pool of specialized knowledge, research-based critical thinking, and expertise can provide unique insights and add hitherto missing dimension to the judiciary's understanding of complex socio-economic and socio-legal cases. At the same time, the lack of courtroom experience, procedural knowledge, and understanding of limits to exercising judicial power and a degree of resistance among the status quoist within the institution are challenges that will need to overcome as well. A number of countries such as United States, Poland, Myanmar, Kenya, Thailand, Spain, Italy that allows jurists or professors of law to be appointed to posts equivalent to that of judges in the high courts or the Supreme Court have vastly benefited from this practice. In India, where academia has expressed its legitimate concerns and grievances for not having adequately nurtured or supported, reintroducing Article 217 Clause 2 Subclause C and appointing jurists and academics as judges of the High Court would send across an important message. A pushback against online abuse and actors' decision to legally take on harassers on social media is laudable. In Kerala, trolls and abusers may fall silent at least for the time being, and thanks to the recent event involving courageous actor in the Malayalam film industry. On January 6, the actor lodged a police complaint against 30 people for posting derogatory remarks beneath one of her posts on social media. The next day, she filed a complaint against businessman Bobby Chemanur, calling him the leader of social media hooligans. Next, 1 in 3 Indians want to buy an electric vehicle next. Report: Women influence 52% of the decisions related to the purchase of EVs in Indian households. 1 in 3 consumers in India is eyeing for electric vehicles for their next purchase, says the Think Mobility report by the Google and BCG Women. BCG. Women are emerging as key decision makers in the EV market. While EV related challenges persist, innovations and localized manufacturing could pay the pave the way for greater adoption. The report highlights significant growth potential in India's automotive market. Chart 1 shows that vehicular market has the high potential for growth in developing countries such as India. On the other hand, countries such as US, Switzerland, and Denmark, which already has a high vehicle penetration rate, have limited for room for further growth. Chart 2 shows that 36% of consumers are showing considering an EV for their next four-wheeler, and 30% are inclined to the elect towards an electric two-wheeler. When read together, charts 1 and 2 show that not only there is a significant growth potential in India's automotive market, as only a small share of the population owns cars, 3.3% people owns car, but a substantial portion of this growth is likely to be driven by consumers who are increasingly inclined towards EVs. Study also estimate 2.7 fold increase in elite households by 2035. This suggests that affordability of higher priced EV is unlikely to deter substantial share of households. However, barriers remain. Over half express concerns over the availability of charging infrastructure. 45% are dissatisfied with high acquisition cost of EVs. 1 in 3 worry about the battery life, and 1 in 5 feel the current variety of models is inefficient. To address these challenges, the report suggests several solutions: improving the availability and discoverability of charging infrastructure, offering innovative financing options, scaling up localized manufacturing, extending warranties, transparency in battery health, and introducing new models, 60% of which are developed by major Indian original equipment manufacturers. Women influence 52% of EV purchase decisions, while they influence only 38% of non-EV purchase decisions. The report says that over 41% of Indian customers with two-wheelers prefer vehicles with built-in navigation systems on the dashboard. It also says that 85% of Indian users are open to considering the car model they rented as their next purchase. Notably, Gen Z is 2.7 times more likely to drive self-drive rentals compared to older generations. 1 in 4 consumers who are buying a car for the first time are planning to purchase a pre-owned vehicle. To convert these intentions into actual sale, factors such as digitization, transparency, and trust are essential. Additionally, 1 in 3 consumers seek pre-owned cars to upgrade their lifestyle. Sellers are 1.5 times more likely to prefer organized channels when selling their cars. Potential temporary gig jobs created by Mahakumbh Mela, 12 lakh. The UP government expects to host 400 million devotees. The economic effect of Mahakumbh extends across multiple sectors, including infrastructure development, event management, security services, local trade, tourism, entertainment, and horticulture. The dip in Israel's unemployment rate in December, 2.6%. Israel's unemployment rate slipped in December from 2.7 a month earlier, indicating that military conflict continued to impact the country's labor market. More than 22% of the labor force were absent from work due to being called into military duty. The amount of crystal meth seized in warehouse in 1.6 in tons. Chinese investment in Pakistan Gwadar Airport in Balochistan. $230 million, Pakistan's largest airport, funded and built by the country's restive southwest by Beijing, has become operational. Gwadar Airport is in the province of Balochistan, which has for decades been the scene of an insurgency by separatists demanding autonomy. Number of Ford vehicles under probe over hands-free tech. The US National Highway Traffic Safety Administration said on Monday it has opened a probe into the Ford motor vehicles over reports of collisions involving company's hand-free driving technology. UGC regulations or state university laws. The crux of the dispute is whether UGC regulations, framed by UGC chairman, vice chairman, and 10 other members, can supersede provisions of the State University Act, which are plenary laws passed by state legislature and assented to the governor by president. Six of Tamil Nadu state universities are present without a vice chancellor. Some of these points have been vacant from the few months to over a year. This impasse is due to disagreement between the governor and the state governments regarding the composition of the search committee for selecting VCs. The governor, as ex officio chancellor of state universities under the University Acts, insists on including a nominee for the University Grants Commission in such committee as per the Regulation 7(3) of UGC Regulations Act. Six of Tamil Nadu state universities are at present without a VC. Some of these posts have been vacant for the few months to over a year. This impasse is due to disengagement between the governor and the state government regarding the composition of the search committee for selecting VCs. The governor, as ex officio chancellor of the state universities under the University Act, insist on including a nominee for the University Grants Commission in the search committee as per Regulation 7.3 of the UGC Regulation Act. UGC Regulations 2018. Conversely, the state government insists on adhering to the respective state university acts, which generally require search committee to consist of one nominee each from the chancellor, the syndicate, and the senate. It opposes UGC involvement due to concerns over erosion of state autonomy in state university governance. Conflicting Supreme Court rulings have complicated the situation. One set of judgments support governor's stance that UGC regulations are mandatory and can override a state university acts in case of conflict. Another set of judgments back the state government holding the UGC regulations are merely recommendatory for state universities. The controversy has been exacerbated by the UGC's draft regulations 25, which are seen to erode state autonomy further. This is somewhat similar standoff in Kerala and in Punjab, where numerous universities also face leadership vacuums. This has led to serious deterioration in university administration, including delays in staff appointments and award of degrees. A constitutional question. UGC regulations are a subordinate legislation framed under Section 26 of UGC Act 1956. Crux of the dispute is whether UGC regulations framed by UGC chairman, vice chairman, and 10 other members can supersede provisions of the State University Acts, which are plenary laws passed by state legislatures and assented to by governor or president. This is a part of a larger question of law dealing with center-state relations. Can delegated legislation, rules, regulations, notifications framed by the union government and its agencies under a central law override the provisions of plenary state law? It underlines a critical constitutional issue regarding the scope of delegated legislation, with the potential for eroding the separation of powers. Federalism, both considered basic features of the Constitution. Article 254, Clause 1 of the Constitution addresses conflicts between central and state laws. It states that if a state law is repugnant to the central law, Article 251 of the 254 Clause 1 of the Constitution, it states that if the state law is repugnant to the central law and matters in concurrent list, central law will prevail and the conflicting part of the state law will be void. The plain wording of Article 254 Clause 1 indicates that it applies only to plenary laws enacted by Parliament and state legislature and not to delegated legislation. The Supreme Court has constantly upheld this interpretation in several landmark judgments. The leading case on the subject is uh, Tikaramji vs. State of Uttar Pradesh 1956. The Supreme Court ruled that Centre's Sugarcane Control Order 1955, issued under Essential Commodities Act 1955, could not repeal the provisions of the Act of UP Sugarcane Act 1950, UP Sugarcane Act 1953. It held that power of repeal, if any, was vested in the Parliament, and Parliament alone could exercise it by enacting appropriate provision in regard thereto. Parliament could not delegate this power of repeal to any executive authority. Such delegation, if made, would be void. In Indian Express newspapers, Bombay versus Union of India, the Supreme Court ruled subordinate legislation may be questioned on any of the ground on which plenary legislation is questioned. In addition, it may also be questioned on the ground that it does not conform conform to the statute under which it is made. It made further it may further be questioned on the ground that it is in contrary to some other statute. That is because subordinate legislation must yield to plenary legislation. In JK Industries versus Union of India, Supreme Court again ruled subordinate legislation may be questioned on the ground that it is inconsistent with the provisions of the Act, or it is in contrary to the other statute applicable on the subject matter. Therefore, it has to yield to the plenary legislation. These rulings make it clear that central government and its agencies cannot use subordinate legislation to override plenary state laws. Any changes require a plenary central law passed by Parliament. There is no repugnancy between provisions of UGC Act 1956 and Tamil Nadu's University Acts because no provision of the UGC Act addresses the appointment of VCs. According to UGC, its power to form Regulation 7.3 relating to VCs is derived from Section 26(1)(e), which allows UGC to define qualifications for university teaching staff, Section 26(1)(g), which permits regulations of standards and coordination of work or facilities in universities, or UGC Act 1956, but the VCs is not teaching staff. Within the meaning of Section 26(1)(e), in all Universities Act, Central State VC is an officer of the university along with the Chancellor, Registrar, Controller of Examinations, Finance Officer and Directors. So above all, two provisions do not apply to VCs. Moreover, the UGC's power under the Section 12D of the Act are only recommendatory. While the UGC can advise on standards in higher education, it cannot enforce compliance except by withholding grants under Section 14. The Supreme Court has affirmed this interpretation in University of Delhi versus Raj Singh, ruling that UGC regulations are advisory, not mandatory. Universities can choose whether or not to follow them, elevate the risk of losing funding. Thus, UGC Regulation 7.3 on VC is a classic case of executive overreach in delegated legislation and is ultra-virus of the UGC Act 1956. Additionally, the UGC's shifting stance, no regulation on VCs till 2010, introducing a UGC nominee on the search committee in 2010, withdrawing this requirement in 2013, reinstating it in 2018, and expanding control in the 2025 draft regulations reflects an agenda driven more by administrative control than a genuine effort to improve academic standards. Recently, some conflicting Supreme Court judgments have created confusion. In Annamalai versus Secretary, Information and Tourism 2009, State of Bengal versus Anindya Sundardas Gambhir, then K. Gandharvi versus State of Gujarat 2022, and Professor blah blah, the Supreme Court held without articulating reasons that once UGC regulations are laid before both houses of parliament, they became part of the UGC Act, invoking 254(1) and rendering any VC appointments contrary to these regulations void. However, in Kalyani Mathivanan versus KV Jairaj case, the Supreme Court used the rational but confusingly ruled that UGC regulations are not mandatory for state universities unless adopted by the state. In PJ Dharmaraj versus Church of South India, the Supreme Court held if the state government itself has not adopted the amended regulations, the same cannot be applicable to the institute. In other words, UGC regulations only applied if adopted by the state. The interpretation that UGC regulations lose their subordinate character and automatically become part of the Parent Act may be being laid by the Parliament is not supported by the Constitution or General Clauses Act 1897. It contravenes such significant precedent ruled in Chief Inspector of Mines versus Kiram Chandra Thapar, where the Supreme Court held rules continue to be the rules subordinate to the Act, and though for certain purposes, including the purpose of construction, they are to be treated as if contained in the Act. Their true nature as subordinate rule is not lost. In other words, they retain their character as subordinate legislation and do not become integral to the Parent Act. There are three recognized procedures for laying subordinate legislation before the legislature without further notice. Here, the subordinate legislation takes effect immediately and is for information only. Negative resolution procedure. Here, legislation takes effect immediately but can be amended or modified by the legislature within limits period, as in the case of UGC regulations under 28(1). Affirmative resolution. Here, the resolution takes place only after receiving prior approval from the legislature. Courts recognize only rules and regulations laid under affirmative resolution procedure as part of the Parent Act because the other two procedures have nil or limited legislative oversight on and allow executive overreach. Given the constitutional significance of the dispute and doctrinal ambiguities, the defining ruling of Constitutional Bench of Supreme Court is imperative. Such a ruling would hopefully reaffirm Article 254(1) of the Constitution applies only to conflicts between plenary, central and state laws, clarify that delegated legislation does not automatically become part of the parent act unless laid under the affirmative resolution procedure, and emphasize the advisory nature of UGC regulations for state universities unless adopted by the state. Such clarity is essential not only to restore the normal functioning of the state universities across the country, but also to preserve the delicate balance of legislative powers between the center and states. How does welfare politics translate into votes? When welfare is the new normal, credit monopolization through branding and centralization may not necessarily fetch electoral rewards if people struggle to access welfare services. Kailash KK24 Politics of Welfare BJP and Discerning Voter. Right from the time of its independence, India has had its to contend with extreme inequality and a large population of poor people. While there have been improvements since 1947, the twin challenges of high inequality and widespread indigence remain. This has made social welfare an integral element of electoral politics, but what is the exact dynamic that determines how welfare initiatives translate into votes, and if and when they do? This paper by the political scientist K. K. Kailash attempts to answer these questions using voting studies data from the National Election Studies Post Poll Survey 24 Lok Sabha elections. Kailash's key contention is that voters do not cast their votes only on whether they receive private welfare benefits, but also consider factors such as their experience in the well-being while accessing these goods and services. One cannot assume that those who receive the benefits will necessarily vote for their benefactor party. What the paper describes as an individual level process is such as how easy or tough it was to access those benefits, and the overall economic well being of the voter are also factors. The paper starts off with an overview of the scholarship on welfare politics in India, grouping them into two broad streams. One set of studies are focused on programmatic elements, the design, implementation, delivery outcomes, etc. Other set has looked into influence of welfare policies on two related elements, credit attribution and voting behavior. While the two set of studies have bridged the gap between politics and public policy, they do not necessarily talk to each other. This paper brings together the two strands to examine if the experience of accessing welfare matters to vote choices, and in the process nuances long-standing debates on social service delivery and its relation to vote choice. Before coming to the electoral impact of what has come to be described sometimes derisively as revenue politics, it might be useful to consider how welfare politics has evolved in India. Initially, the imperative to address socio-economic inequality drove the consumption of welfare programs as part of planned economic growth. The state perforce had to play a significant role because social forces were status quoist and would not let change happen. Social forces were status quoist and would not let change happen. This paradigm changed when India switched to a market-led growth strategy. Welfarism, from being a good in itself, began to be seen as an antidote to the limitations of the market. Welfare provisioning became an appendage to the process of economic reforms, a tool to ensure that reforms remained sustainable in the face of rising inequalities and insecurities it created. But with the advent of dogmatic adherence to fiscal discipline and concomitant budgetary constraints, states struggle to increase investment in welfare understood in its traditional sense of public goods. For instance, Investments in public healthcare and education began to stagnate. Apart from resource constraints, there was another reason why welfare policies conceived as capacity building investments took a backseat. The outcomes do not conveniently materialize with the rhythm of electoral calendar and made credit claiming difficult. Around this time, welfare witnessed another paradigm shift to a more responsive strategy where provisioning had to meet internationally accepted, supposedly more efficient and equitable norms and delivery mechanisms. In other words, all government spending has to cope with the demands of market capital forms of state intervention. This paved the way for an extreme reliance on technology, cash subsidies, and direct income transfers, all aimed at making the outputs more tangible. Welfare delivery was reduced to putting money in people's hands, ostensibly to bestow on them the freedom to choose what they want to do with it. Kailash argues that this reorganization of public welfare as per market principles did two things. One, it recast citizens as consumers, and two, it turned welfare provisioning into an opportunity for political purposes, seeking to mobilize voter support. Not only did this end up degrading welfare as policy intervention, it also had a negative impact on long term economic thinking and strategic provisioning of resources for capacity building. Schemes that offered cash transfers, housing, and gas connections were tangible and could be easily connected to a singular benefactor, enabling the brand identification of parties. This welfare, having started out as a policy instrument to reduce inequality, provide a safety net, and build national capacity for equitable growth, has dwindled into a handy tool to offset the limitations of the market, and today serves as a key component of the electoral arithmetic of political parties. Though most sectors in which schemes are implemented are in state or concurrent lists, the paper notes that incumbent BJP has gone big on the centrally sponsored schemes. This centralizing thrust, accompanied by the monopolizing credit through branding, as evident from the nomenclature of various centrally funded schemes, are other key factors on the current welfare regime. To ascertain whether welfare provisioning helps in credit and voters votes to the incumbent, Kailash divides voters into beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries and further divides the former into who benefited from one of those schemes. Voters don't always follow credit. In 2024, there was a 30-point increase in the number of people crediting the center compared to 2019. For the five major schemes they were asked about: public distribution system, Ujjwala, MG Narega, Ayushman Bharat, and housing scheme. Given the branding and constant reminder through advertisement in multiple spaces that these programs were personal guarantees of the Prime Minister, the attribution is not surprising, notes the paper. But did the credit translated into votes? Not necessarily. First of all, when welfare becomes the new normal, with every party competing to promise similar schemes, voters' expectations, especially about the nature of service delivery and quality of services, go up. When welfare becomes the new normal, with every party competing to promise similar schemes, voters' expectations, especially about the nature of service delivery and quality of services, go up. As a result, voter tends to be more discerning about their expectations from the government. So the incumbent must not only have a reasonable basket of programs but also ensure their quality and easy access to citizens. Without quality and access, claim making could prove counterproductive. As Kailash argues, credit monopolization and centralization may not be bring imagined electoral rewards if people struggle to access welfare services. Kailash also tests the hypothesis that double engine government, that same party in power in the state and center with greater welfare offerings, would enable the incumbent to monopolize credit and create more partisan voters. He created two categories of state: those ruled by incumbent and those under opposition. Survey reveals that while the central government did get credit for welfare programs across the country, irrespective of party government at the center, did not get the votes even in the states ruled by the incumbent. However, in states ruled by the opposition, when the voters gave credit to the state government for welfare schemes, the votes also followed. In conclusion, it would be fair that there are limits to credit claiming and welfare branding. As the paper concludes, welfare beneficiaries are no longer passive recipients but have become discerning consumers. If welfare provisioning is now an integral element of voter mobilization, then governments will have to focus more on improving access as well as other dimensions of the economy that impact personal economic being. Parents of Arjikar victim unhappy with the court verdict. The family called an investigation a failure of CBI. West Bengal CM Sri Mamata Banerjee and leader of opposition Suvendu Adhikari both say convicts should have been awarded capital punishment. Ban of use of spring water in J&K village facing mystery deaths. Jammu and Kashmir on Monday barred villagers from Badhal village in Rajouri from drawing water from a local spring and cautioned community feast until reason for 17 recent deaths in 3 families could be determined. Additional Deputy Commissioner to depute 2 or 3 security personnel round the clock at the Bauli so that use of water of the said spring can be stopped completely. Lifelong imprisonment of the Arjikar case convict. The court noted that all the sentences will run concurrently. The court also held that convict has the right to prefer appeal against the judgment and he has the right to avail legal aid for filing the said appeal. Court said the victim's parents would get a compensation of 10 lakh for the death of the victim and 7 lakh for the rape as per regulations of the National Legal Services Authority. However, parents told the court they did not want any compensation. We only want justice for our daughter, nothing else. The victim father said in the court. The court also criticized the role of hospital authorities and said that there were no doubts that efforts were made to show the death as a suicidal one and so that the hospital authority would not face any consequences. Observing the pain and suffering of the parents cannot be compensated with any amount of cash, the judge wrote in the order. At the same time, I think that as the death of the victim was caused while she was on duty, the state has also to the liability to pay compensation, which will be in addition to the compensation ordered under Section 395 BNSS. Before pronouncing the sentence, the court asked if the convict would like to make a statement. I have not done anything. I am being falsely implicated, the court convict said. In the order, the court noted that accused got the scope to explain the circumstances, but he failed to offer any alternative explanation, denying the presence at the scene of crime. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee said, Government will move the Calcutta High Court demanding capital punishment. I strongly feel that this is a heinous crime that warrants capital punishment. We will plead for it in the High Court now, Ms. Banerjee said in a social media post. Ms. Banerjee said she also wanted capital punishment in the case and was not satisfied with the outcome of the case. Had there been capital punishment, it would have brought some consolation. Adding that if West Bengal police were allowed to investigate the case, they would have ensured death penalty. The parents of the victim said they believed that it was the rarest of the rare case. Trump vows to stop all censorship from this day forward. All country will flourish. Our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage any longer. The Republican leader vowed to put America first, and that country would flourish and be respected under his leadership as a peacemaker and a unifier. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before. He said, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life, Mr. Trump said in his inauguration speech, calling the new moves a revolution of common sense. At the Capitol, Vice President J.D. Vance and sworn in first, taking the oath read by Supreme Court Judge Brent Kavanaugh on the Bible given to him by his great grandmother, Mr. Trump followed moments after noon, using both a family Bible and the one used by President Abraham Lincoln in his 1861 inauguration as Chief Justice John Roberts administered his oath. A cadre of billionaires and tech titans, including Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Tim Cook, and Sundar Pichai, were given prominent positions in the Capitol Rotunda, mingling with Trump's incoming team before the ceremony began. And also there was Elon Musk, the world's richest man, who is expected to lead an effort to slash spending and federal employees. Stalin urges CMs to oppose draft rule. In his letter to chief ministers, Mr. Stalin referred to the resolution adopted in the Tamil Nadu Assembly. I strongly believe that it is essential for all states to take similar stand. I request you to consider passing the resolution in August Assembly, same line as ours. It is crucial that we stand united. Mr. Stalin listed out certain provisions in 24 regulations: the conduct of entrance exam for UG PG admissions, eligibility for MTech with 4-year multiple entry exit system, expressed his reservations. Appointment of non-academicians as vice chancellor, exclusion of state governments from vice chancellor search committee, and cross-disciplinary teachers. Ensure Malik is given video conferencing facilities, Supreme Court tells HCs. Yasin Malik. Lakhimpur Kheri case, Supreme Court asked police to probe allegations of Mishra influencing witnesses. Ashish Mishra, an accused, being produced in a court in 2021. The younger Mr. Mishra is accused of murder after a sports utility vehicle allegedly belonging to his convoy mowed down farmers protesters protesting controversial laws in a rally in Lakhimpur Kheri. Soldier killed in encounter with militants in Sopore. Helicopter scams. Supreme Court to examine Michael's bail on Feb 18. Supreme Court on Monday agreed to examine a plea for regular bail filed by Christian Michelle James, the alleged middleman in Augusta Westland helicopter scam on February 18, appearing before a bench. Justice Vikram Nath, advocate uh, Aljo Joseph, Sriram Barakat, and MS Vishnu Shankar said their client had been in custody as an under trial without bail for almost period he would have served had he been found guilty under the law and sentenced to imprisonment. The CBI said investigation was complete. The court gave central agencies 3 weeks or no more to file its counter affidavit. In 2023, Top Court had noted that besides several offences, including cheating, dishonesty, inducing delivery of property, criminal conspiracy, and corruption, which are also alleged to have committed the offence of forging valuable security. Chennai Airport row, which amounts attack on DMK, calls it anti-farmer master of drama. Tamil actor and TVK President Vijay accused the ruling DMK as master of staging drama and taking contradictory stance on farmers' issues. Nearly a year after political plunge, Mr. Vijay met villagers protesting against Chennai's second airport proposed at Parandur in neighboring Kanchipuram district. He opposed destroying thousands of acres of farmland and 13 water bodies for the airport project. The effect of global warming has forced Chennai city to battle floods during every monsoon. A recent scientific study pointed out that the reason for floods in Chennai was not the destruction of wetlands and water bodies in the surrounding areas, he said. Reason for floods in Chennai was the destruction of wetlands and water bodies in the surrounding area. Uttarakhand to roll out UCC by the end of January. State Cabinet in a meeting chaired by Chief Minister approves rule for the legislation passed by Uttarakhand Assembly in February 24. Uniform Civil Code has kept tribes out of its ambit. Uttarakhand Cabinet on Monday approved the rules for the UCC at its meeting chaired by Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami. Paving the way for implementation of the code, he said the government would issue a gazette notification for the legislation by January 8. The UCC passed by the Assembly in February 24 has kept tribal people out of its ambit and provisioned a complete ban on practices such as halala, iddat, and talaq. A UCC passed by the Assembly in February 24 has kept tribal people out of its ambit and provisioned a complete ban on practices such as halala, iddat, and talaq, customs related to marriage, divorce, and Muslim personal law. It ensures that women are given equal rights in matters related to property and inheritance rights, The code makes it mandatory to register marriage and divorce, failing which the couple concerned will be the code makes it mandatory to register marriage and divorce, failing which the couple concerned will be deprived all the benefits of government facilities. It has stringent provisions for failures uh, to register live-in relationships. The children born out of live-in relationship will be considered a legitimate child of the couple. In the assembly polls of 22, we had promised to the people of Uttarakhand that we will bring a law for all as we form the government. We brought uniform civil code under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We approved in the UCC manual in cabinet meeting, and we will issue the notification this month only. For the implementation of UCC, the state government has set up an online portal for registration of marriage, divorce, rights of inheritance, live-in relationship, and termination of live-in relationship. This will help every citizen to register and access his data and application status on their mobile phone or at home. A government communicate. To make registration facility simple and easy for the citizens, the common service centers have been authorized by the state to take up the registration. In hilly remote areas where internet facilities are not available, the agents of CSC will go door to door and provide the above facilities to the citizens. The government officials said to make registration simple and smooth, the option of registration through Aadhaar has been given and tracking can done through email and SMS. Panel on Waqf begins last round of talks. Report may be tabled in the budget season. Parliament's Joint Committee on Waqf Amendment Bill 24 has entered the last round of deliberations, and the members have been given 48 hours to submit their amendments to the legislation. The panel will spend 2 days going through the 44 clauses of the bill. According to the informed sources, the report on controversial bill is expected to be tabled in the first part of the budget session. The government, the sources said, wanted to move the bill at the earliest, keeping in mind the Bihar Assembly election schedule later this year. The BJP has reached out to all its allies. Janata Dal United leader and Union Minister Rajiv Ranjan Singh has defended the bill in the Lok Sabha. When the government introduced it on August 8 last year, he had argued that it was aimed at bringing transparency in the functioning of the work board and not an attempt to interfere with the running of Mars. The Telugu Desam party has expressed these reservations and strongly argued that the bill should be sent to the Joint Committee for further scrutiny. The panel will meet on January 24 and 25 for clause for clause discussions. Take a call on Rajona mercy plea by March 18. Supreme Court tells Center. Supreme Court death row convict Balwant Singh Rajona's mercy plea in Bian Singh's assassination case. Balwant Singh Rajona case in Bian Singh assassination court, urging the union government to take a call. Else, the court will go ahead and decide the petition on merits. Birla urges parties to devise internal code for members, expressing concern over decline in number of sittings and decorum of the legislature. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla on Monday urged the political parties to devise an internal code of conduct for members' behavior in the House. He was speaking at the inaugural function of 85th All India Presiding Officers Conference in Patna. It is our collective responsibility to strengthen the parliament and other institutions. Then only people will get maximum benefit. The House should be saved from repeated adjournments and there should be meaningful discussion. All members should maintain the dignity of the House. The Lok Sabha Speaker said it was duty of the presiding officers to run the housekeeping of the constitutional values and work towards setting a good example for strengthening the democratic institution. Pole body to hold global conference. Republic Day parade will feature more cultural events. The military character of the Republic Day parade will stay, but we will bring in more and more cultural elements and try to make it a wider participation of the society, both in terms of invitees moving in and in terms of performances. This year's parade will have 5,000 performers across Kartavya Path, allowing everyone present and not only those around the presidential dais to witness the cultural performances. How many vehicles can one own in the same city? Asked Supreme Court. It asked if there is a law to ensure commercial residential complexes have enough parking slots on their premises. Bench proposes orally that public authorities must buy only electric vehicles. The Supreme Court on Monday asked if there was any restriction on the number of vehicles a person could own in the same city, and if there was a law that ensured commercial and residential complex had enough parking spots on the premises. If there is any is there any embargo on the number of vehicles a person can register? There are people who buy their second and third vehicles in the same city. The court was considering a note prepared by the amicus curiae, senior advocate Aparajita Singh, which has recommended a robust and integrated public transport system for reducing the number of private vehicles, a prima cause for rising toxicity levels in air quality on the roads of national capital. Justice Oka asked whether development regulations with respect to residential and commercial complexes had provisions which mandate the permission would not be given unless there was a room for parking. Those who can afford to buy apartments in these residential complexes, they have two or three vehicles. The court said building regulations must make it clear how many parking spots were mandatory in residential and commercial complexes. In some cities, an apartment is given two parking spaces or at least one per apartment. The court said substantial parking policy was necessary considering the large inflow of vehicles into the capital city. We want to keep a balance as electricity is just drawn from coal. Plea calls for creation of dedicated Ministry of Senior Citizens. The Supreme Court of India on Friday allowed a petitioner seeking creation of dedicated ministry for senior citizens. The bench headed by Justice P.M. Narasimha, who heartedly even said judges were part of the senior citizen age group, told the petitioner G. Priyadarshini, represented by senior advocate Gopal Sankar Narayanan and advocate Rahul Bhandari. Highlighting the necessity of the separate department or ministry for the elderly, Mr. Shankar Narayan said India may have one of the largest aging population in the world. It is imperative to have an exclusive ministry, exclusive department that can cater to the policy, schemes, financial assistance, healthcare requirements, pensions. This unprecedented rise in the aging population, if not categorically handled by the exclusive ministry's defense, the state shall have detrimental implications. It submitted that India Aging Report 23, Caring for Our Elders, uh, said there were 149 million people aged 60 above and years and above in 22, comprising 10.5% of country's population. SC states criminal defamation against proceedings against Rahul. Two women Maoists killed in Chhattisgarh. Gariyaband curfew in Meghalaya village after mob attack on school. East Khasi Hills administration imposed a curfew in areas falling under Makrana village after a violent mob tried to dismantle a school. The mob attack thwarted by the police was linked chief opposition that no objection certificate issued by president. Sub-adult tiger dies after being hit by train near Nagpur. Final electoral rolls for Panchayat polls in Jammu and Kashmir published. Plan to allow non-medical graduates to teach medical students draws criticism. The NMC, in its recent draft teacher eligibility qualifications in medical institutions regulations, has retained 2-year provision allowing non-medical graduates with MSc and PhD degrees to teach medical students anatomy, biochemistry, and physiology during the transitional period. The above qualification should have been granted by NMC, recognized accredited Laksh Mittal presiding president of United Doctors Fund, stated that this move undermines the foundations of medical education, which directly impacts the quality of healthcare delivery in our country. He said the decision to permit non-medical practitioners to teach critical preclinical subjects such as anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry in medical colleges was deeply concerning. Settle with borrowers only after exhausting all options, RBI tells ARCs. Bank tweaks guidelines to emphasize aspects such as cutoff date for one-time settlement eligibility, permissible sacrifice for various category of exposures to fix settlement sums, and methodology to arrive at a realizable value of security. RBI on Monday modified guidelines related to asset reconstruction companies, envisaging that settlement with borrowers should be undertaken only after the possible ways to recover dues have been examined. The Master Direction, Reserve Bank of India, Asset Reconstruction Companies Direction 24 is also being updated accordingly. Every year she to frame a board approved policy for settlement of dues payable by borrowers according to latest guidelines. Policy should inter alia cover aspects such as cut-off date for one-time settlement, eligibility, permissible sacrifice for various categories of exposures, while arriving at a settlement amount and the methodology for arriving at a realizable value of other security. Large firms resist even good government policies. Large firms resist even good government policies. Even a good government policy requiring timely payments to the key MSME sector face resistance from large business entities. Speaking in an Exim Bank of India event, he said the government came up with a very thoughtful behavioral nudge to alleviate micro, small, and medium enterprises working into capital issues. The law gives enough leeway to make the payment within the financial year and claim the deduction, but even for this kind of small nudge, there is resistance from the large corporates. An association representing them asking not to do away with 45-day payment ceiling for asking to representing them are asking to do away with the 45-day payment ceiling for MSMEs. Look at some of the political economy and behavioral resistance that continues to prevail in the country. Central Bank of India's quarter 3 net jumps and NCLT orders Go First airline liquidation. NCLT on Monday ordered liquidation of the budget airline carrier Go First Airways 2 years after it shut operations and approached the court seeking voluntary insolvency. The bench of NCLT, comprising judicial member, allowed the application for liquidation filed by the Committee of Creditors. The application is allowed by ordering liquidation for the corporate debt, namely airlines, Go Airlines. In the insolvency filing, the airline said it owed creditors 11,000 crore, including banks, financial institutions, vendors, and aircraft lessees. Of these, the amount owed to financial institutions stood at 6,500 crore, blah blah. Hindenburg says not under investigation by the US SEC. US short seller Hindenburg Research said it is not under investigation by US SEC at its rubbished alleged links to the founder to a large hedge fund for preparing reports targeting fund. Hindenburg is not under investigation by the SEC to our knowledge, and any suggestion to the contrary is false. If Boeing delivered on time, more pilots would be flying Akasa. More pilots at Akasa Air would be flying today if Boeing's aircraft delivery were timely, according to the airline's chief executive officer Vinay Dubey. Is it a reality that we were supposed to get more aircraft and therefore we should have seen a larger percentage of pilots clocking hours or in training? It's absolutely. Out of 775 pilots hired for flying at Akasa Air, 60% are able to lock flying hours. Most of the remaining 300 pilots will also be able to fly by 25 end. Pilots were hired with an 18 to 24 month timeline in mind before they can start flying, keeping in mind the long training footprint for the final batch of 200 to 300 pilots that joined the airline without a prior Boeing 737 experience, as well as 6 month notice period to be served by the new hires on their previous organizations. Mr. Dubey said, countering allegations from pilots that it was hoarding pilots. The airline received three Boeing 737 MAX in the calendar year of 24 after adding a plane per month since it was launched in 22 because of the delays in delivery from Boeing because of the heightened regulatory oversight for it following mid-air blowout of a door on Alaskan Air in January 24. Later, a 55-day strike by machinists too brought production to a halt. It will add in 27th aircraft next week if the airline had continued to grow its fleet at a rate it did since its launch in 22. It would be closing the financial year 25 with nearly a 42 aircraft in fleet. The aircraft is 100% current on pre-delivery payments to Boeing and won't be leasing any planes. To assert staff concerns, Akasa's strength is its employee-centric approach. We have made a commitment to them and we will stick by that. We are a well-capitalized airline. We have a strong strategy and we are here for a long term. 8 dead, 7 injured in a fire at home for the elderly in Serbia. Colombia vows war as guerrilla violence kills 100, displaces 11,000. Pakistan targets militants in the northwest after surge in violence. Pakistan took out a strike targeting militants in the restive northwest district bordering Afghanistan following a surge in attacks and sectarian strife. It is the first large-scale strike in recent year. The latest attack in Kurram came on Friday when the gunmen ambushed at 8 trucks, killing 2 security personnel and 5 drivers. Yoon Sun's probe as supporters face charges over court rampage. South Korea's impeached president Yoon Suk Yeol refused to be questioned by investigators as dozens of his supporters faced being charged over a violent rampage on court building. Security was beefed up at the jail where he was being held at pre-trial inmate and at the Constitutional Court which is holding his trial. US to withdraw from Paris Agreement and expand drilling. The Republican leader vows to declare national emergency to expand drilling in the country. It would take a year to leave agreement after submitting a formal notice to the UN. US President Donald Trump on administration on Monday announced the United States' intention to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord for a second time, the defiant rejection of the global efforts. President Trump will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, White House said. It comes as global average temperatures over the past 2 years surpassed critical 1.5 degree warning threshold for the first time, underscoring the urgency. The inflation crisis was caused by the massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national emergency. We will drill, baby drill, Mr. Trump said. We will be rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it, he added. Pakistan airport funded by China enters into operation. China has invested heavily in the city of Gwadar, where Pakistan's largest airport has come up. Pakistan's largest airport has built by the country's southwest by Beijing has become operational, officials said. Xi and Vice meet Vance Musk ahead of swearing in. China's vice president held meetings with the US vice president elect leaders, including Elon Musk, in Washington on the eve of Donald Trump's inauguration. Yemen's Houthis to restrict their attacks to Israeli ships transiting Red Sea corridor. The announcement comes in the wake of troops arrived in Gaza Strip between Israel and Hamas. Yemen's Houthi rebels have signaled that they will limit their attacks in the Red Sea corridors only to Israeli affiliated ships, just as ceasefire in Gaza Strip entered its second day on Monday. Houthis' announcement, made in an email sent to the shippers and others on Sunday, likely will not be enough to encourage global firms to re-enter the route that's crucial for cargo and energy shipments moving between Asia and Europe. Their attacks have halved traffic through the region, cutting deeply into the revenues for Egypt, which runs the Suez Canal linking the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. The ceasefire is considered fragile, said Jacob P. Larson, the head of maritime security for BIMCO, the largest international association. It is assessed that even minor deviation from the ceasefire agreement could lead to hostilities, which would prompt the Houthis to again threat against the broader range of international shipping. Houthis made announcement that through their humanitarian operation coordination center, saying it was stopping sanctions on the other vessels as it previously targeted it since 23. For Israeli ships, those sanctions will be stopped upon the full implementation of all phases of the ceasefire. However, Houthi body left open, resuming attacks against both US and UK, which have launched airstrikes targeting the rebels over their sea-borne assaults. Myanmar military minority armed groups have agreed to a ceasefire, say China. The Myanmar military and Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army agreed to sign a formal agreement for a ceasefire that began on Saturday. China's foreign ministry halting fighting near the border of both countries. The two sides held talks in China's southwestern city of Kunming, where they thanked Beijing for its efforts to promote peace. His ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said during regular news, cooling down to sit the situation in the north of Myanmar is in the common interest of all parties. In Myanmar and all countries of the region, China will continue to promote peace and dialogue and provide support and assistance to the peace process in northern Myanmar. The MNDA is one of the several ethnic minority groups, armed groups fighting to repel the military from where what they consider their territories. It is part of so-called Three Brotherhood alliance with the Tang, Tang National Liberation Army and Arakan Army that launched an offensive against the military junta in late October 23, that's seizing swathes of territory near the border with China. The MNDAA, made up ethnic Chinese, said last July that it has taken control over the major military base near Chinese border. A sports presenter apologizes to Djokovic over insulting comments. Less happy despite exist and nicest week in Melbourne. Sinner and Swiatek claim ITF World Champions. Rishabh Pant named captain of Lucknow Super Giants. New king Jaiswal all set to conquer one-day format. The steely-eyed southpaw is in red-hot form and brimming with such confidence that he will strike fear in the opposition bowlers if he plays in a way that Rohit and Kohli could in their form. Newfound nerve muscles crosstalk shows exercise helps neurons grow. The conventional concept of nerve-muscle interaction emphasizes that nerves control over muscles. However, Ritu Raman and her colleagues at MIT started to wonder if the reciprocal could be true, if stimulating muscles could encourage neurons to form. Satellite projects aim to heads off future wildfire at Los Angeles firefighters battle the remaining hotspots. Tech focus groups are launching new orbiters as space launches get cheaper, while machine learning techniques will shift the torrent of information, fitting it into a wider picture of fire risk in the changing environment. Satellites can detect from space areas that are dry and prone to wildfire outbreaks, actively flaming and smoldering fires, as well as burnt areas and smoke and trace gas emissions. Low Earth orbit is generally less than 1000 km above the surface. Satellites here offer high resolution ground images, but see any given point only briefly as they sweep around the planet. Geostationary satellites orbit at around 36,000 km, remaining over the same area on the Earth's surface, allowing for the continuous observation but usually a much lower resolution. Climate change brings more wildfires encroaching on a human induced areas. The resolution can be crucial. Based on the satellite observations at Los Angeles, it's very hard to determine if a particular house is on fire. Geostationary satellites orbiting at 36,000 km remain over the same area of the same Earth surface, allowing continuous observation. EFA aims to launch 4 satellites by 26 at a cost of 3 million. Trump 47th president vows to stop all censorship. Donald J. Trump on Monday took oath for the second term as the United States President and announced a raft of executive orders saying the golden age of America has begun. In the fiery inaugural address, the 47th US President described January 20 as the Liberation Day and declared that America's decline is over as changes will come very quickly. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, and most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration from the entire world. Mr. Trump has stormed back into the White House with a promise to aggressively reset US policies in the range of domains including immigration, tariffs, energy. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar attended the inauguration ceremony. He carried a letter from Mr. Modi for Mr. Trump, sources said. The new US President listed a series of actions he would roll out immediately, including declaring a national emergency at the Mexico border, renaming Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America, and taking back the Panama Canal after years of illegal and unconstitutional restrictions of expression. I would also sign the executive orders to stop all censorship and bring back free speech to America. Lifelong imprisonment for Arjikar case convict. A sessions court in Kolkata on Monday sentenced Sanjay Roy, the convict of Arjikar rape and murder case of Dr. Arjikar Medical College. The additional district and sessions judge Sialda Anirban Das said it was evident that this case did not meet the stringent criteria for being classified as the rarest of the rare case. In this 172-page judgment, the judge said that the case called for the carefully considered and appropriate sentence that balanced the gravity of the crime with principles of justice, rehabilitation, and preservation of human dignity. He noted that court must resist the temptation to bow to the public pressure or emotional appeals. Counsel of the Central Bureau of Investigation and family members of the victim had prayed for the capital punishment for Roy, the former civic police volunteer. The court had on January 18 held Roy guilty under Section 64 rape, 66 causing injury resulting in death, and 103 murder of the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita. You will be in prison till the last day of your life, the judge told Roy while reading order. The order noted that Roy will undergo rigorous imprisonment for life and imposed a fine of 50,000 for offences under Section 64 of the BNSS. In case of default, he will have to undergo simple imprisonment for 5 more months. He was handed rigorous imprisonment for life and a fine of 50,000, Section 395 of BNSS for offence under Section 1031 of BNSS, and in default imprisonment for 5 months and rigorous imprisonment for remaining a remainder of his life for the offence under Section 66 of the BNS. Badlapur, 5 held responsible for the encounter. An inquiry report submitted before the Bombay High Court state 5 police officers were responsible for custodial death of Akshay Shinde, the lone accused in the Badlapur sexual assault case. Jobs for youth priority for the next 5 years, Kejriwal, Aam Aadmi Party national convener, said on Monday that if his party wins on February 5, creating jobs for youth will be top of his agenda. Stalin urges CMs to oppose draft regulations. Court gives 24-year-old women death sentence in murder case. Central Center left ban gives nod for sugar export. The Union government on Monday lifted ban on sugar exports, partially allowing industries to export 1 million tons in 24-25 season, ending in September. Study moots inclusion of 179 groups in SC/ST OBC lists. In a group of largest ethnographic studies of its kind, Anthropological Survey of India and tribal research institutions across the country have for the first time comprehensively categorized 268 denotified semi-nomadic and nomadic tribes that previous commissions believed have never been classified. The 3-year long study commissioned by the Niti Aayog panel has recommended the inclusion of 117 of these communities on the scheduled tribes, and other backward classes list of 26 states and union territories. At least 85 of them are being recommended as fresh additions. Among the fresh additions, 46 communities have been recommended for OBC status, 29 for SC status, and 10 for ST status. Creating jobs for youth going to be the priority for next 5 years, Kejriwal. Ex-CM addresses 3 rallies in Northeast Delhi. Anurag Thakur dubs AAP anarchic, abuses betray panic Kakkar. AAP releases blank book to show BJP's achievements. Senior AAP leaders and Rajya Sabha member on Sanjay Singh launched a book titled Achievements of BJP in Delhi for all whose pages were blank, taking a jive with the unfulfilled promises. To serve Delhi's people, you have to be on good terms with the LG Kailash Gehlot. Give relief to patients awaiting aid outside AIIMS in bitter cold, Rahul writes to Nadda Atishi. 5 held responsible for Badlapur encounter. Magistrate submits inquiry report to Bombay High Court on custodial death of sexual assault case accused. It says 5 policemen could have handled situation but resorting to force. Farmers postpone march to capital, seek early meeting. IIT Madras director B.K. Kamkoti on Monday said 5 scientific papers published in peer-reviewed journals validated the anti-effective properties of cow urine. He was invited to Goshala on Mattu Pongal Day dedicated to cattle. A video clip of his speech went viral on Monday. That 5 research papers on the properties of cow urine have been published in peer-reviewed journals. One of them, peptide profiling in the cow urine, reveals molecular signature of physiography-driven pathways and in silico predicted bioactive properties. Akali Dal begins membership drive, rebels say party leaders defying Akal Takht orders. Rising from the ashes inside Bihar school run from cremation ground. Has been educating over 100 slum children at a cremation ground in Muzaffarpur, Bihar since 2017. Mr. Kumar's initiative Apan Pathshala has transformed the lives of these underprivileged kids, offering them a chance to break from the cycle of uh, poverty. CM issues clarification amid public outrage over jumbos sent out of Assam. Which panel is better for Mullah Pariyar's SCR states? Court asked Tamil Nadu and Kerala whether the supervisory committee formed by it or a statutory committee under the new Dam Safety Act will be more effective in taking care of the act of the dam. The Supreme Court on Monday orally asked the states of the Tamil Nadu and Kerala to address it whether the supervisory committee formed by the court would be more effective in taking care of the 129-year-old Mullah Periyar Dam, or the job must be given to the statutory committee under the new Dam Safety Act of 2021. Which one of these committees will be more effective? It is the statutory committee under 2021 Act, and then we can avoid overlaps and avoid unnecessary problems. The committee would be chaired by the Central Water Commission chairperson and represented from the centre. Custodial death of detained man sparks tension in Sambal. Being young is not a mitigating factor of death sentence. Quote, IT staffer's death, wife asked to bring minor son before court. Supreme Court on Monday directed the wife of Bengaluru-based IT firm to produce their minor son before it through video conferencing. Pilgrimage season in Sabrimala Ayyappa temple draws to close. So thank you for listening. See you in the next one.